The discovery. The sky over Earth was clear that day. High above, hidden in the vastness of space, a group of aliens watched the small blue planet. These aliens, from a faraway galaxy, had never heard of Earth before. They had traveled across the stars, searching for new worlds to conquer and strange new things to learn about. But Earth, with its green forests and blue oceans, was different. They didn't know why, but they felt drawn to it. The leader of the alien group, a tall being named Zar, looked down at the planet through a large screen in the ship's command center. "There is something special about this world," Zar muttered. The others around him were silent, watching the blue planet below. They had found many planets, but none like this one. Zar turned to his second-in-command, Zana. "What do we know about it?" Zana scanned through the information they had gathered so far. "The inhabitants are called humans. They are a primitive species, but they have developed strange technologies. Nothing like we've seen before. They are still in their early stages of space exploration." Zar thought for a moment. "We need to learn more. Prepare a team to land." Without hesitation, Zana signaled to the crew. Moments later, a small group of alien scouts led by Zar descended to Earth. They arrived in a remote area, far from human cities, in a dense forest. As the aliens stepped off their ship and onto the soil of Earth, they were amazed by the beauty around them. The trees were tall and full of life. The air was fresh, and the sun shone down warmly. Zar couldn't help but wonder how such a small planet could feel so alive. The alien scouts spread out to explore. They quickly realized that humans had a rich history and culture, but there was one thing they had never expected: a mysterious substance called human nectar. According to the information they gathered from the planet's ancient texts, human nectar was said to have strange and powerful properties. It was rumored to be a healing agent, capable of enhancing physical strength, intelligence, and even longevity. The aliens had heard of many substances from different worlds, but none had ever been described with such awe and mystery. One of the scouts, a younger alien named Cal, was the first to bring it up. "What if this nectar is real?" Cal asked. Zar raised an eyebrow. "It sounds like a myth, something invented by humans to make themselves feel important." "But what if it's not?" Cal insisted. "What if it's a substance unlike anything we've ever encountered?" Zar turned to Zana, who had been quiet up until now. "What do you think, Zana?" Zana nodded slowly. "It's possible, but we should be cautious. If this nectar truly has the power the humans claim, it could be dangerous." Zar nodded, agreeing. "We will need to find it and study it." The team moved deeper into the forest, following the clues they had gathered. After hours of searching, they finally came upon a hidden grove. In the center of the grove was a small, glowing plant. Its flowers shimmered in the sunlight, casting a soft golden glow across the area. This was it, the source of the human nectar. The aliens approached the plant carefully. Zar was the first to step forward, his eyes wide with curiosity. The plant seemed to hum with energy, as if it were alive and aware of their presence. Zar reached out and touched one of the petals. It was warm to the touch, and a strange feeling washed over him, as if the plant was calling to him. "This is it," Zar whispered. "This is what the humans have been talking about." Zana moved closer. "It's beautiful, but it feels strange." Zar looked at the plant, his mind racing. If the nectar from this plant truly had the powers the humans described, it could change everything. It could give them an advantage over every other species in the galaxy. It could even make them the most powerful beings in the universe. The alien leader turned to his crew. "We will take this back to the ship. We need to study it further. This could be the key to our success." As Zar gave the orders, the aliens carefully gathered the plant. The glow of the nectar seemed to brighten as they placed it into a special container. The moment the plant was sealed, the grove fell silent again. The aliens stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of what they had discovered. "We must keep this a secret," Zar said, his voice low. "If any other species learns of it, they will come for it." We can't let that happen, Zana agreed. We'll keep it hidden. But we should be ready for anything. With the plant safely aboard their ship, the alien crew took off from Earth, leaving the planet behind. As they flew back into the depths of space, Zar couldn't shake the feeling that their discovery was far more than just a rare plant. It was something that could change everything. As the stars rushed by outside the ship's windows, Zar looked down at Earth one last time. "This is only the beginning," he muttered. "The galaxy will never be the same." And with that, the aliens headed back to their home, unaware that the true story of human nectar was just about to begin. The first taste. The moment Zar held the glowing plant in his hands, the whole crew felt it. The air around them seemed to thrum with an unfamiliar energy, as if the universe itself had paused to acknowledge the significance of their discovery. The once quiet alien ship now buzzed with anticipation. They were about to uncover the true power of human nectar. In the ship's laboratory, a high-tech chamber designed for studying unknown substances, Zar placed the glowing plant carefully on a cold metal table. Its petals continued to shimmer softly, like stars in the night sky. The crew gathered around, their eyes wide with curiosity. But it was Zar, the leader, who would decide the next step. After all, it was his decision whether they would move forward or retreat. "We have to be cautious," Zar warned the others, though his voice betrayed the excitement he felt. "We don't know what this is capable of." Zana, standing by his side, nodded. "We need to analyze it first. We can't afford to make a mistake." Zar glanced at the plant again, its iridescent glow beckoning him. He knew Zana was right. Caution was essential, but there was something undeniable pulling at him, a sense that they were on the edge of discovering something that could forever change the course of their species. "Cal," Zar called out. The young scout, eager and impatient, stepped forward. "You've been the most interested in this substance. It's only fitting you're the first to taste it." Cal's eyes widened with excitement. "Are you sure, Zar? I mean, what if it's dangerous?" Zar gave a small, confident smile. "That's why we have the ship's medical equipment standing by. If it proves harmful, we'll have you back to normal in minutes." Cal hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. There was no backing down now. He'd been part of this discovery from the beginning. He would face whatever came next with the others. Zar took a step back as Cal carefully plucked a small petal from the plant. The instant it touched Cal's skin, a wave of heat shot through him. It wasn't painful, not exactly, but it was powerful, intense. His heart began to race and his senses heightened. Everything around him seemed clearer, sharper. The room was filled with the scent of the nectar, sweet, but with an almost metallic tang that made his mouth water. Cal raised the petal to his lips and hesitated. For a brief moment he thought he heard a voice, soft but clear, whispering in the back of his mind. "Do it. You know you want to." With a deep breath, Cal pressed the petal to his mouth. The moment it touched his tongue, something extraordinary happened. His vision blurred for a split second as though his brain was processing too much information at once. Then everything snapped into perfect clarity. His senses went into overdrive. He could see the finest details of the ship's walls, hear every hum of the machinery, and feel the pulse of energy vibrating through the very air. His body felt alive in a way he'd never experienced before, as though he could outrun the fastest ships in the galaxy. But the power wasn't just physical. Cal felt his mind expand as if doors inside his brain were opening wide, allowing him access to an ocean of knowledge and insights he had never imagined. He could recall every detail of the alien cultures they had encountered, every star system they'd mapped, every language he'd ever studied, all at once, flooding his consciousness. For a moment he felt like he could conquer the universe. Then the feeling hit him. It was like an electric shock, both thrilling and terrifying. His body trembled, his mind swirling with the new flood of information. He staggered backward, gripping the table for support. Zana rushed to his side, her eyes wide with alarm. "Cal, are you all right?" Cal's chest heaved with breaths, his heart racing uncontrollably. He looked at her, his pupils dilated. He couldn't finish his sentence. His mind was too full, too overloaded to form coherent thoughts. Everything around him was spinning. "I need a moment," he gasped, sinking to his knees. His body felt as if it was fighting to keep up with the surge of energy coursing through him. His hands shook as he reached for his head, trying to calm the flood of thoughts crashing against his skull. Zar stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "It's too much for him," he said, his voice thick with both concern and awe. "The power, it's more than we expected." Zana activated the ship's medical system and a soft glow enveloped Cal, stabilizing his condition, but Cal didn't notice. He was lost in the overwhelming sensations coursing through him. His body was reacting to the nectar's influence in ways that were completely foreign to him. His muscles were stronger, his thoughts faster, his senses sharper, but there was also a deep fear gnawing at him. Was this what the rumors had warned about? Was there a limit to how much his body could handle? The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, but finally, Cal regained control. He looked up at Zar, his eyes still wide with the aftershock of the experience. "It's unbelievable. I can't explain it. I've never felt so alive." Zar studied him carefully, a mixture of wonder and caution in his gaze. "How much of this nectar did you consume?" "Just a petal," Cal replied, his voice shaking. "Slightly. But it's more than I could ever imagine. I can feel everything, every thought, every idea. It's like I have access to the universe itself." Zana's voice was serious. "This isn't normal. Cal, we need to test it further. We can't be certain of its full effects until we understand it better." Zar stood still for a moment, his gaze fixed on Cal, then slowly turned to the rest of the crew. "The power of this substance is undeniable, but the danger is also clear. We must tread carefully. We've only scratched the surface of what human nectar is capable of." Cal, still trembling, nodded. He wasn't sure what he had just experienced, but one thing was certain. They had crossed a line. The nectar wasn't just a delicacy. It was something far more dangerous and far more powerful. As Zar looked out of the window of the ship, staring into the endless expanse of space, he couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery would change everything. The galaxy would come for Earth, and they would stop at nothing to control the power of human nectar. And he, Zar, would lead them all into this new and dangerous era. The story was only just beginning. The hunt begins. The moment Zar gave the order to leave Earth behind, the tension within the alien ship was palpable. The discovery of human nectar was already changing everything. What had begun as a mission of exploration was quickly turning into something much bigger, much darker. Zar's mind raced with possibilities. His crew had felt the raw power of the nectar firsthand, but it was clear that they weren't the only ones interested in it. The ship sailed silently through the vastness of space, headed back toward Zar's home planet. But the deeper they moved into the unknown, the more uneasy Zar felt. Something was wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As the ship passed through a dense asteroid field, Zar stood alone in the command center, staring out into the void. He ran a hand through his dark, textured hair, trying to focus on the task at hand. His thoughts kept drifting back to the strange, almost hypnotic sensation he had felt when he touched the human nectar. It wasn't just the power. It was the allure of it, the promise of domination. But the more he thought about it, the more dangerous it seemed. The universe was full of ambitious beings, each more desperate than the last to get their hands on anything that could give them an edge. What if they weren't alone in wanting to control the nectar? Suddenly, a red alert light flashed on the console in front of him. Zar's heart skipped a beat. A ship had appeared on the sensors, a massive vessel easily 3 times the size of their own. It was cloaked, hidden from sight until it was nearly upon them. "Zana!" Zar called out, his voice sharp. "Get to the command center, now!" Within moments, Zana rushed into the room, her expression grim. "What's going on?" "We're not alone," Zar said, his voice tight with tension. "There's a ship on our tail. It just appeared out of nowhere." Zana quickly ran the diagnostics, her fingers flying over the control panel. Cloaking technology, and this is no ordinary ship. They've been following us for a while. Whoever they are, they've known exactly where we were. Tsar's mind raced. He wasn't surprised. He had been expecting this moment, but he didn't know how soon it would come. It was only a matter of time before someone caught wind of the discovery. Is there any way to identify them? Tsar asked. Zana shook her head. Not yet. Their ship is completely cloaked. We can't even get a proper reading on their life signs. Damn, Tsar muttered under his breath. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We can't let them take us. Zana didn't hesitate. She activated the ship's defense systems, locking down all critical systems. The entire crew braced themselves for whatever would come next. The ship began to rumble as engines shifted into high gear, pushing them forward with tremendous force. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the ship, followed by a deep mechanical hum that filled the air. Tsar's heart leapt into his throat. The other ship had made its move. We're under fire, Zana shouted, her eyes wide with shock. They're firing on us. A blast shook the ship's hull, sending sparks flying through the command center. Tsar gritted his teeth, but his mind was focused. Zana, I need you to engage the cloaking device. We'll turn the tables on them. Zana's fingers flew over the controls, but before she could respond, another blast rocked the ship. This time much stronger. The impact sent Tsar crashing to the floor, the ship's alarms blaring in his ears. Zana, Tsar shouted again, his voice strained. What's happening? I can't activate the cloak. There's too much interference, she cried, panic creeping into her voice. Tsar pushed himself up from the floor, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. His mind was racing, but one thought was clearer than the rest. They were in grave danger. Whoever was on that ship wasn't just trying to chase them down. They were trying to kill them. Another blast rocked the ship, and Tsar could feel the ship beginning to break apart. Metal groaned, alarms blared louder, and the very air seemed to vibrate with tension. The ship was taking damage far faster than it could repair itself. Time was running out. Prepare for emergency landing, Tsar shouted. Zana, get us to the nearest planet. We need to hide. Zana nodded sharply, setting a course for the closest uncharted planet in their path. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. The alien ship's weapons continued to fire, each blast more intense than the last. The ship's shields were barely holding up. Tsar could feel the cold sweat on his brow as he turned to face the rest of the crew. Get to your stations. We need to survive long enough to make it to that planet, Tsar ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. But just as Zana set the ship on a new course, a voice, cold and calculated, came over the ship's communication system. It was clear as day, but there was something unsettling about it. Tsar, I see you. The voice echoed through the ship's speakers, making Tsar freeze in place. And I know what you've taken from Earth. It was a voice Tsar didn't recognize, but it was full of authority and malice. Whoever this was, they knew about the human nectar. How do you know about the nectar? Tsar demanded, trying to steady his voice. The voice chuckled. You're not the only ones who have been watching Earth, Tsar, and now you've made a very dangerous mistake. Tsar's heart raced. This was no random enemy. Whoever this was, they had been tracking them for far longer than they realized. Zana's face turned pale as she continued to navigate the ship through the atmosphere. The cloaked ship was still firing, and the impacts were becoming harder and harder to ignore. They're closing in, Zana whispered. We need to land now. Tsar glanced out the viewport, seeing the uncharted planet growing closer by the second. It was their only hope of escaping this terrifying pursuer. But as the ship barreled toward the planet's surface, another message crackled through the comms. You cannot outrun us, Tsar. The hunt has only just begun. The transmission ended, and for a moment, everything fell silent. But that silence was filled with dread. Tsar knew they were being hunted now, not just for the nectar, but for their lives. As the alien ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, Tsar gripped the controls tightly. The survival of his crew depended on their ability to hide, and perhaps, if they were lucky, to fight back. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was about to learn just how far Tsar would go to protect the most dangerous secret the universe had ever known. And the hunt was just beginning. Secrets beneath the surface. The ship hit the planet's surface with a deafening crash, the impact sending violent tremors through the metal structure. Zar's crew was thrown across the cabin as the emergency landing sequence activated, the ship's systems desperately trying to stabilize the descent. Sparks flew from the control panel and alarms blared, creating a cacophony of chaos that drowned out all sense of calm. "Is everyone all right?" Zar's voice rang out, his voice strained from the force of the crash. His breath was ragged as he struggled to push himself up from the debris. His body ached, but adrenaline pushed him to focus. Zana was the first to respond, coughing from the smoke that filled the cabin. "I'm good," she said, but her voice was tight with panic. "The ship's been compromised. We've lost power to the main engines. We'll be stranded here unless we fix it." Zar gritted his teeth, trying to shake off the dizziness. The damage was severe. There was no denying that. But right now, survival mattered more than anything else. Their pursuers would not be far behind. Cal, still recovering from his earlier experience with the human Nectar, stood shakily, his face pale. He clutched the control panel for support, his eyes wild. I can feel them," he whispered, almost to himself. "The others, they're close, they know where we are." Zar's eyes narrowed. The others, whoever they were, had been tracking them for far too long, and now they were on the planet's surface, closing in. They couldn't stay in the wrecked ship. It was too vulnerable. "We need to move," Zar said, his voice grim. "Zana, get the emergency gear. Cal, help me secure the area. We need to get out of here now." The crew quickly gathered their things, preparing for a long trek across the unknown planet's surface. They had no idea what kind of dangers lurked here, but it didn't matter. It was either survive or die. The planet would have to be their temporary refuge. The air outside was thick, and the temperature was far colder than they had expected. The landscape was desolate. Rocky terrain stretched for miles, broken only by jagged cliffs and deep ravines. Strange, distant sounds echoed from the shadows. The planet had an eerie silence to it, interrupted only by the sound of their own movements. As they trekked through the rocky landscape, Zar couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The others, whoever they were, could be anywhere. Hiding, in the crevices of the cliffs or in the forests that seemed to stretch on endlessly. Their cloaking technology had proven to be near perfect, making it impossible to detect them. Cal was unusually quiet, his senses still on high alert. "They're here," he muttered, his voice strained. "They're watching us. We can't stay in one place too long." Zar turned to him, frowning. "Who are they, Cal? Who's hunting us?" "I don't know." "But they're powerful," Cal replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. "And they're not from any system I've encountered before. I can feel it." Zar clenched his fists. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, but no one had the kind of resources it would take to track them so thoroughly. Whoever was after them wasn't just trying to get the human Nectar. They were after something else. They had a plan. "We're going to the coordinates," Zana said, breaking the silence as she pointed toward a distant mountain range. "I've mapped out a location that could be a good place to hide. If there's any chance we can repair the ship, it's our best shot." They continued moving, pushing deeper into the rocky terrain. The silence around them was unnerving, broken only by their footsteps. The strange sounds from earlier now seemed closer, more distinct. It wasn't the wind or animals. It was something else. Something watching them. As they neared the mountain range, the landscape began to change. The rock formations grew sharper, more jagged, and the air grew thicker with a strange energy. The crew felt it too, a pulsing, almost magnetic sensation in the air. "We're close," Zana said, her voice barely audible as she scanned the area. "The readings are coming from beneath us. There's something down there." Zar's curiosity piqued, but a deep sense of unease settled in his stomach. "Something beneath us? What is it?" "I don't know," she replied, her eyes wide. "But the energy readings are unlike anything I've ever seen. It's as if the entire planet is alive and it's reacting to us." Cal took a step back. This place feels wrong. I can feel it in my bones. But it was too late. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, as if the planet itself was waking up. The rock formations around them started to shift and groan. Zar's heart skipped a beat as he realized something massive was happening. "Get down!" he yelled, pushing the crew to the ground just as the earth began to crack open in front of them. From deep within the mountain, a sound that could only be described as a roar echoed through the air. It was primal, ancient, and filled with an unmistakable sense of rage. The ground trembled again, and then, out of the cracks, emerged something that none of them had ever seen before. Massive serpentine shapes slithered from the depths of the planet, their long, coiled bodies covered in iridescent scales that shimmered in the dim light. Eyes like molten lava glowed from the dark recesses of their forms. "By the stars," Zana whispered in shock. The creatures were unlike anything the crew had encountered in all their years of exploration, and yet they weren't the worst of it. As the creatures emerged from the depths, Zar felt the air change again. Something else was coming. Something much larger. It was then that they saw it. Rising from the cracks in the ground was a massive structure built into the side of the mountain, half buried under centuries of debris. Ancient, alien, and covered in strange symbols, it seemed to pulse with life. It was a temple, no, an altar, and the creatures were swarming toward it, as if called by an unseen force. The crew stood frozen, trying to process the overwhelming sight. But one thing was clear. Whatever this place was, it wasn't uninhabited. And the beings that were hunting them were not the only danger on this planet. Zar's mind raced. The human Nectar had brought them here, but now they were in the heart of something far more ancient and dangerous than they could ever have imagined. And whatever secrets the planet held, they were about to be dragged into a conflict that could change the very course of their survival. "Move," Zar barked. "We need to get inside that temple. We have to learn what this place is before those things find us." As the crew sprinted toward the temple, the earth rumbled beneath them. The creatures were closing in, and Zar knew their time was running out. Whatever was beneath the surface of this planet wasn't just a hiding place, it was a battleground. And Zar and his crew were trapped in the middle of it. The weapon beneath the temple. The massive stone doors of the ancient temple groaned and creaked as Zar and his crew pushed them open, the air thick with the scent of old metal and forgotten histories. The darkness inside was oppressive, only the faintest glow emanating from cracks in the walls, casting eerie shadows across the massive chamber before them. "Keep your weapons ready," Zar whispered, his voice low. Every instinct, he had screamed at him that they were not alone. The creatures from the surface, those serpentine beasts, were still out there, their eyes glowing in the shadows as if they were searching for something. And as they ventured deeper into the temple, Zar couldn't shake the feeling that the planet itself was watching them. The crew moved cautiously, weapons drawn, as they made their way down a narrow, winding corridor. The walls seemed to close in on them as they descended deeper beneath the planet's surface, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Zana's eyes scanned the walls, which were covered in strange alien glyphs that seemed to shimmer as they passed by. Some were etched so deeply into the stone they almost looked like they had been burned into the rock, while others pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. "There's something here," she muttered, running her fingers over the carvings. "These symbols, they're not just random, it's like they're alive." Cal, still on edge from his encounter with the human Nectar, walked beside her, his eyes darting around. "This place isn't just ancient. It feels like it's been waiting for something." Zar's pulse quickened. Cal's words were too close to the truth. Whatever this temple was, it had been hidden away for a reason. But what could it be waiting for? They rounded a corner and entered a vast chamber, the ceiling soaring above them, far too high to see clearly. The space was illuminated by the faint glow from veins of glowing crystal embedded in the walls, casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the room. At the center of the chamber stood a towering structure, something that resembled a massive altar, but unlike anything Zar had ever seen. It was made of a dark, metallic substance that seemed to absorb light, and it hummed, with a low rhythmic pulse that vibrated in the air. In the center of the altar was a large, intricate design, an inlaid pattern of interlocking shapes, each one seeming to rotate ever so slightly, as if in motion. And in the center of it all was a single, perfectly round orb. "This is it," Zana whispered, her eyes wide. "This is what's been calling them." Zar could feel it too, a pull like gravity tugging at his very core. He knew instinctively that this was the heart of whatever had drawn them here. And it wasn't just the human nectar that had brought them to this planet. It was the power of this temple, the power of what lay hidden inside it. Suddenly, a sharp echoing growl reverberated through the chamber, sending a wave of shock through Zar and the crew. The sound came from somewhere in the dark, outside the glow of the crystals. Zar's hand instinctively went to his weapon, but before he could draw it, the ground beneath them trembled violently. "It's them," Cal said, his voice strained. "They've found us." A low, rumbling roar filled the room, growing louder, closer, and more menacing with every passing second. The serpentine creatures, their massive forms slithering through the dark, were closing in fast. But as the creatures grew nearer, something else happened. A series of sharp, high-pitched sounds erupted from the walls. A strange energy built, filling the space, pulsing through the chamber in waves. "It's activating," Zana gasped. "The altar. It's alive." Zar didn't need to be told twice. "Move. We have to get to the orb. Now!" They rushed forward, moving as quickly as they could, but the creatures were fast. Too fast. They could hear the heavy thuds of their enormous bodies crashing through the dark, the hissing of their breath echoing off the walls as Zar neared. The altar? The energy in the room spiked, sending a sharp, biting chill through his body. The orb at the center of the altar pulsed with bright, shimmering light, almost as if it were responding to their presence. He reached out to touch it, but just before his fingers made contact, a deafening roar shook the chamber. The creatures were here. Zar spun around, his heart racing. The creatures surged from the darkness, their glowing eyes fixated on the crew. But something was different now. Something had changed. The creatures seemed confused. They hesitated as if caught in some kind of trance, drawn to the altar in a way they couldn't control. "That's it," Zana shouted over the noise. "The altar, it's controlling them." But before they could take advantage of the moment, the room shifted. The very walls began to tremble, and with a deafening crash, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. Something much larger than the creatures that had been hunting them. It was as if the temple itself had been hiding a far greater power, something ancient and deadly, and now it was awake. The being that emerged was a towering figure, covered in ancient armor that seemed to be fused with the stone of the temple. Itself, it was humanoid but far larger, its features shrouded in mystery. Its eyes glowed with a strange, molten light, and its massive sword crackled with energy, casting sparks through the chamber. The being raised its sword high, and the creatures around them began to move again, but this time, they weren't attacking. Zar's crew, they were kneeling, they were submitting. The towering figure, whatever it was, held dominion over them, and Zar knew that they were no longer dealing with mere beasts. This was something far more dangerous. The energy in the eye. Chamber grew more intense, and the altar's pulse quickened. The figure turned its glowing gaze toward Zar, and in that moment, Zar realized the terrifying truth. The weapon wasn't just the orb. It was the entire temple, its hidden power ready to be unleashed. But who would control it? And what would it do to the galaxy? The tension in the air was thick, as if the very fabric of space and time was being torn apart. And as Zar and his crew stood in the presence of this ancient guardian, they understood. Nothing would ever be the same again. The power of the fallen guardians. The towering figure before them raised its massive sword, the weapon crackling with a fierce energy that vibrated through the stone beneath their feet. Zar's heart pounded as the creature's molten eyes bored into him, every muscle in his body frozen with the weight of the moment. "This is it," Cal muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with fear. "Either we fight or we die here." Zar's mind raced. The Guardian was powerful, too powerful. Whatever ancient force had created this being, it had been waiting for eons for someone to awaken it. Now, Zar and his crew were caught in the middle of a dangerous game of power they didn't fully understand. The orb, the altar, the creatures. They were all part of something far larger, a chain of events that had been set in motion long before they ever arrived. The towering figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. The ground shook under its weight, and the creatures around them, once feral and bloodthirsty, had fallen into line. They knelt in reverence, their glowing eyes staring at the Guardian with what seemed like a mixture of fear and awe. "What is this?" Zana whispered, her voice full of awe and confusion. "Is this a king? A god? Some kind of weapon?" Zar didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was too consumed with the implications of what he was seeing. If the Guardian had the power to control the creatures, to command them, it could wipe them out without a second thought. But the question gnawed at him. Why wasn't it attacking? Why had it just stood there watching them? The air felt thick with anticipation, as though the temple itself was holding its breath. The orb on the altar pulsed brighter now, its light shifting between hues of red and gold, as though it were feeding off the energy in the room. Zar's pulse quickened. Was it the orb that controlled the Guardian? Or was the Guardian the key to unlocking the power of the entire temple? Then, with a swift motion, the Guardian raised its hand and the entire chamber trembled. The walls groaned as ancient mechanisms, hidden for millennia, shifted into place. A low rumbling sound echoed through the room as the very structure of the temple seemed to come alive, activating with an eerie energy. "Zar!" Zana shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "We have to get out of here now. This place is collapsing." But Zar didn't move. His gaze was locked on the Guardian, on the molten eyes that seemed to burn with an ancient fury. There was something familiar about this being, something that called to him deep within his soul. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a protector, an ancient defender that had been forgotten by time. In that moment, something clicked. A memory, half-formed and buried under layers of confusion, came rushing back to him. The stories from his childhood about ancient beings, about guardians who once protected the galaxy from destruction. But they had been lost to history, buried beneath the sands of forgotten worlds. This guardian, this weapon, had been created to protect something, or someone. But what? Before Zar could process any further, the Guardian moved. It lifted its sword and swung it with a speed that was impossible for its size. The air cracked with the force of the strike, and the stone walls around them exploded into shards. Zar and his crew barely managed to dive out of the way, the sound of the impact deafening as the very foundation of the temple began to crumble. "Run!" Cal screamed, grabbing Zana's arm. "We can't stay here, this is beyond us." But Zar remained frozen, his eyes locked on the Guardian. There was something in its gaze, something that spoke to him, something that seemed to beg for understanding. The pulse of the orb increased, its light blinding now, and Zar knew that whatever happened next, it would change everything. "Zar!" Zana screamed, her voice desperate. "We have to go." For a heartbeat, Zar hesitated. But then something incredible happened. The Guardian, as if sensing his internal conflict, lowered its sword and nodded, slowly, deliberately, as though granting him permission to approach. "Zar, what are you doing?" Zana cried, pulling him back. "Don't get any closer." But it was too late. Driven by a force he didn't fully understand, Zar stepped forward, walking toward the orb in the center of the altar. The Guardian didn't move to stop him. It simply watched, its molten eyes filled with something like hope, or perhaps longing. As Zar reached the orb, the entire room shifted. The energy in the air became electric, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he felt as if the weight of the universe was bearing down on him. The orb began to glow brighter, the light blinding. And then with a flash, Zar was engulfed in its energy. The world around him seemed to disappear. His surroundings blurred into a whirlwind of light and sound, and for a moment he felt weightless, as though time itself had come to a halt. He could feel the power of the orb coursing through him, the ancient energy of the temple rushing into his body, unlocking something deep inside. He was no longer just Zar, the human explorer. He was something more. He could hear voices, ancient voices, whispering in languages he couldn't understand. He saw visions of battles long past, warriors fighting to protect the galaxy, beings of immense power waging war against forces that threatened to destroy everything. And at the center of it all was the Guardian, standing as a protector, a force that had been created to defend the universe from unimaginable horrors. But then, the vision shifted. Zar saw a different kind of being, one far more powerful than the Guardian. It was a figure cloaked in shadows, its eyes glowing with a cold, unfeeling malice. This being held the power to corrupt, to control, to destroy. And it was clear, this was the true enemy, the force that had been locked away by the Guardians. The moment the vision ended, Zar stumbled back, his breath coming in short gasps. The orb dimmed, its power retreating. The Guardian stepped forward, its eyes no longer molten but filled with understanding. "You've seen it." The Guardian's voice rumbled, its tone resonating deep in Zar's chest. "The darkness that threatens all life. It is real and it is coming." Zar's heart raced as he tried to absorb the weight of what he had seen. What is it? What does it want? The Guardian's eyes burned brighter. "It seeks the power of the Nectar. The power you possess, it wants to use it to destroy." Suddenly, Zar understood. The human nectar wasn't just a delicacy. It was a weapon, a key to the power of the Guardians. And now Zar and his crew were not just players in this ancient battle. They were the last line of defense against an enemy that could unravel the very fabric of the universe. But the question remained, could they control the power of the nectar? Or would they become the very thing that the darkness used to destroy everything? The last stand of the Guardians. Zar stood at the center of the crumbling temple, the weight of the Guardian's words echoing in his mind like a distant drumbeat. His heart pounded, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the light from the orb slowly dimmed around him. The temple's once imposing structure was now an unstable ruin, cracks spreading through the ancient stone like the veins of some dying creature. Behind him, Cal and Zana struggled to find their bearings. The air around them felt thick with unease, charged with the unnatural energy that had flooded the chamber. Zar felt the tension like a constant hum in his bones. Time was slipping away. The darkness was coming. He turned to the Guardian, who was now kneeling before him, its molten eyes filled with a somber understanding. The ancient protector no longer appeared like a mindless weapon. It was a being of deep wisdom and burden. "What now?" Zar asked, his voice hoarse. The Guardian's voice resonated in the very air around them, its words like thunder in the quiet. "Now you prepare to face the true enemy. The darkness is rising. You have the power, Zar. The nectar, the ancient weapon. You are the only one who can stop it. But you must understand, the cost will be high." Zar's stomach twisted. The cost? What did that mean? He glanced at Zana, who was standing a few paces behind him, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She couldn't even begin to understand what they were dealing with, but the weight of it was clear in her eyes. Cal was scanning the temple's collapsed halls, looking for an escape route, though he knew it was futile. They were trapped. "What are we supposed to do?" Zar asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "We have no training, no knowledge of this power. How are we supposed to stop something like that?" The Guardian's molten eyes flickered, then shifted to a gentler tone. "You are human, Zar. You hold within you an unshakable will, the heart of your kind. That is why the darkness fears you. You will need to learn the power of the nectar. Learn it quickly." Zar stepped back. "I'm not a soldier. I don't know how to wield something like this." "Your kind has always been underestimated," the Guardian said, its voice growing softer, almost contemplative. "But it is your resilience, your ability to adapt, that has carried you this far. The nectar is not a weapon. It is a gift. A gift you must learn to control before it controls you." Zana's voice cut through the tension. "What's the darkness?" What does it want with the nectar? The guardian turned its eyes toward her, and in that moment, the room seemed to darken, the temperature dropping sharply. It is ancient, older than the stars themselves. It feeds on the destruction of life, the unraveling of creation. It seeks the nectar not for its taste but for its power to corrupt. It wants to remake the universe in its image, a universe without light, without hope. Tsar's mind reeled. He had no answers, no solutions. All he had was this ancient being, its cryptic words, and the knowledge that if they didn't act fast, everything they knew and loved would be consumed. I can't do this alone, Tsar said, turning to his crew. I don't even know where to start. Cal stepped forward, his expression fierce. You won't be alone, Tsar. We're in this together. Whatever happens next, we fight it together. Zana nodded, determination flooding her features. We'll help you. We'll figure this out. Tsar felt the warmth of their support, but the reality of their situation weighed heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for survival now. He was fighting to protect an entire galaxy from an unimaginable force, and that kind of responsibility was heavier than anything he had ever felt. The Guardian stood towering over them, its gaze intense. You must take the nectar, Tsar. It will bond with you, unlocking the power within. But be warned, it will not be easy. The darkness will sense the power in you, and it will come for you faster than you can prepare. Tsar's heart raced. The nectar, the power of the Guardians. Could he truly wield it? Would he be able to control it? Or would it consume him, just as the darkness sought to consume everything else? Do it, Cal urged. We don't have time. Tsar swallowed hard. Taking a deep breath, he stepped toward the altar, where the orb still pulsed with that strange, glowing light. The moment he drew close, the energy surged, a wild force that seemed to pull at him from all directions. His body trembled under the weight of it, but he didn't step back. He couldn't. Without a second thought, Tsar extended his hand toward the orb. As his fingers brushed the surface, the world exploded into a blinding light.